So if you could mute, if you aren't muted, that would be very helpful just for our beginning here. And I know there are many structured literacy coaches with us, but those of you who are not coaches, if you could please take the time to let us know where you are in New Mexico, your school or learning community that you support and your role there, that would be really great. You can either do that in the chat or feel free to change your name in the Zoom. We're also just going to take care of a few odds and ends before we officially introduce the title of our COP today, but we're going to invite you to jot and sketch with us throughout today's presentation. So if you would like to grab something to do that with, it could be your device, but maybe a piece of paper, some different colors, writing tools to make those annotations as we go along. I am Christina Meyer-de Zurich, and my co-presenter is Susan Wilson. We're both structured literacy coaches supporting different schools throughout the state of New Mexico. And this is the community of practice on the science of reading, or the science about reading, and the instructional interleaving with MLSS. Today, we are going to share our objective with you. We're also going to take a brief look at the MLSS and structured literacy frameworks, as well as go into some oral language, background knowledge, and vocabulary, getting the MLSS layers to work. And when we close, we'll ask you to please provide us with some feedback, and we'll share the resources with you today. We have many links, live links. We will also get our slide deck out to you, and we'll share our contact information as well. Please feel free during this community of practice to unmute or use the chat so we can respond to your questions and your insights as much as possible within the presentation itself. So today we are going to provide you with opportunities to leverage and enhance your current understandings of MLSS and the instructional planning and delivery that you already use and that you need to be using to meet your students' needs, using the science of reading, the New Mexico Language Instructional Scope 2.0, and the MLSS framework. As I've mentioned, we've got resources and materials for you to use for reflection and collaboration, for planning purposes. We don't intend them to represent the only way of implementing the fluidity of the layers. We just want to provide you with a starting point and maybe something that will add to your repertoire of resources. At this point in time, we would like you to choose a standard. Maybe it's one that you have in mind. Maybe it's one that really, for some reason, you connect with more than another. And we're going to ask that you refer to this standard throughout the rest of this COP, or community of practice. I'm going to drop this link into the chat. This is the New Mexico Instructional Scope. Here we go. So if you'd like to jump into that and find the standard that you'd like to work with, please go ahead and do so. Or you could use this one that I've chosen. I'm going to be using the Reading and Literacy Standard 1.1 from first grade. Ask and answer questions about key details in a text. And as I work through this today, throughout the presentation, I'm going to be reflecting on how it connects with students' needs for practice and acquisition in semantics and syntax. And I'll drop that link one more time for the New Mexico instructional scope, in case you didn't get it, if you just joined us now.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for being patient with our technological challenges. I know you can't see my face, but I'm thrilled to have you all with us. And we're going to be using a Jamboard this morning. And when we use that Jamboard, I want you to contemplate in what ways this quote affects or impacts your thinking about the MLSS process and how it guides your instructional choices and actions as we move forward. So what we're asking you to do is write on one of the sticky notes in the designated Jamboard your thoughts about this. If your birthday is January through April, you're going to write in Jamboard 1. If your birthday is May through August, you're going to write in Jamboard 2. And then if your birthday is September to December, you're going to write in Jamboard 3. We'll have about 5 minutes to write your thoughts and read through some of the other thoughts that are in your same Jamboard. And we would love if some of you would be prepared to share a thought or thoughts that resonated with you that someone else wrote in that Jamboard when we come back. So you have about 5 minutes right now to just write your thoughts on what resonates with you.
And I'll go ahead and read aloud the quote. Connections between language, literacy, cognitive, motor, social, and emotional development are inextricable, interconnected, and interdependent.
All right, anybody finishing up final thoughts? Please feel free to do what you need to do on that front. Do we have anyone that would like to share something that resonated with you that someone else shared?
So I'm seeing, just to read a few, learning is learning, no matter the content, how everything is connected and so important. Literacy is a complicated concept. We need to consider the needs of the whole learner, not just the fragments where they struggle. Deficiencies in any area often lead to emotional outbursts. Literacy is complicated and includes layers of many aspects, and maybe just a couple more connections in the process are huge. At the early development levels, everything is connected and interdependent.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for your thoughts. The thing that I'm taking from this and our universal understanding is everything is connected. We're looking at a holistic child and a holistic implementation of our curriculum and making sure emotional needs are met and physical needs are met, as well as all of those cognitive and social things. So thank you so much for that. Now, I would love for you to take a moment before we move on to the next portion. And I just lost my question for you. Think about where you are with your current understanding with the MLSS framework and its implementation, and what you still might need or want more information on as we're moving forward. Go ahead, Christina.
There we go. We have in a nutshell, just a brief overview, right, of our MLSS framework. We have these outer rings or layers that can often get neglected, but they're here interworking with layers 1, 2, and 3. Layer 1 for all students, layer 2 with layer 1 for some students, and layer 3 with layers 2 and 1 supporting a few students. We're going to continually ask you through various reflection opportunities today how you're leveraging your skills and collaborating with colleagues to effectively create accessibility to all students throughout all 3 layers, including the special educators and the general ed teachers working in collaboration to support students' needs. So here are those prompts in the chat to guide you on the rest of this COP journey.
All right. And as we look at this, we're going to continue to leverage our professional capacity and collaboration by simultaneously embedding the structured literacy framework that you see here into our instruction. In Letters for Early Childhood Educators, second edition, the authors share that intentionally helping young children develop self-regulation leads to growth in other executive functioning skills and all of the developmental domains. And as young children progress through the developmental stages of oral language, they learn to use the structures of phonology, semantics, morphology, syntax, and prosody in more complex and expanded ways. And you'll notice on the first part of this equation, the evidence-based elements that were just mentioned. We need to make sure that that phonology, sound symbol correlation, syllabication, and all of those pieces are evidence-based and incorporated into our instruction. And we have a responsibility to make sure that our instruction is explicitly taught, it's diagnostically analyzed, evaluated, and drives our data or drives our instruction, and that our instruction is also systematic and cumulative. We are using the MLSS implementation guide and the structured literacy framework. In addition to those, today, we're also going to be leveraging some of the MLSS structured literacy self-assessment, which as administrators, your school sites have access to, and we are going to share that link with you as well in the chat so that you can look at that. We're also going to use the WIDA implementation framework. The MLSS is one self-assessment is one component that our administrators can use in their school's literacy plan and 90-day plans. Meeting the needs of all students may require environmental modifications. It could be visual, for example, sign language, alphabet, braille, bold lines, props, etc. It could be physical, where it's bolder textured lines, a furniture arrangement, accessibility of supplies, etc. It could be audiological, where we use whisper phones or amplified listening devices or sound field systems. Some additional ways of meeting student needs within our core instruction might include multisensory books, definitely offering a variety of interest-based and content-based literacy experiences. Our students also need to learn how to handle a book and in what direction we read and write, those types of skills. And we want to offer stories that offer experiences as well. Our knowledge and experience with the simple view of reading and Scarborough's reading rote unequivocally demonstrate the need for both word recognition and language comprehension to develop a student's ability to become a skilled reader. According to Letters for Early Childhood Educators, phonological processing is the most prominent and enduring weakness in people with reading and spelling problems. So some of the supports available might include the ECOT for our early childhood, preschool, kinder age students. It might be a speech language pathologist. Maybe the student qualifies for those services. Maybe you reach out to that speech language pathologist as a resource. Our sound walls are also another vital way to help reach our students and meet their needs. They learn that mouth, lip, and tongue placement. They learn whether sounds are voiced or unvoiced. And when we combine our evidence-based elements for what students need to know with our evidence-based teaching principles, we come up with effective reading instruction. Go ahead to the next slide. Thank you so much, Christina. Our oral language is vital to building that background knowledge and vocabulary. And one of the best ways for students to continue building background knowledge and vocabulary is asking and answering questions. In the early childhood years, questioning should start with developmentally appropriate literal questions and become more inferential with age and practice. Students need to be able to skillfully answer inferential questions and think critically, or at least working in that direction by the time they reach upper elementary school and beyond. When our background knowledge is limited, we must leverage our use of content knowledge and scaffold the intended learning for equitable outcomes. Each of us and our students bring different background knowledge to every learning opportunity because of the diversity of our experiences and our previous learning. Our background knowledge allows our brains to make connections between previous information and new information or concepts. It is a means of determining gaps and measuring student readiness. Our job as educators is to bridge gaps or build background knowledge for our students so that they can connect to the learning, because we must know something to learn something. According to Susan B. Newman in her Amplify Science of Reading podcast, Spring Forward 24, Deconstructing the Rope, background knowledge plays a critical role in supporting students' access to content so that they can explicitly create a knowledge network. The author of Seven Mighty Moves, Lindsay Kamini, states that read-alouds can deepen students' background knowledge, and that utilizing a variety of rich read-alouds can support students in learning new things, thinking critically, and seeing a variety of perspective. She also states that many reading programs neglect background knowledge by focusing too much on skills and strategy, losing opportunities for building background knowledge and understanding. So instead of focusing so much of our attention on strategies, we need to build students' vocabulary and background knowledge. Some of the methods that we often use in building background knowledge may include KWL charts or other types of graphic organizers, providing related life and learning experiences, videos, pictures, stories, etc. We're going to give you the opportunity to go into breakout rooms and share other strategies for building background knowledge. Please make sure that you choose a spokesperson in your breakout room. And we would like you to compile a list of as many additional ways to build background knowledge as you can think of. We're going to do this for about 3 minutes. And then when we come back to the whole group, your spokesperson will be asked to share your group's list. If you see something that is on, or hear something that is on the list that someone else shares and it's applicable for you, please feel free to add it to your list or to put a check mark next to it. And if you hear or see something that is not on your list, please feel free to add it to your personal list. So this is an all right round robin, essentially, and one method of getting everybody writing and everybody contributing to everyone's learning.
All right, I'm going to open those breakout rooms. We may actually decrease the amount of time since we got a late start and we still have a lot of rich content to share with you. But here
Absolutely.
we go into the rooms.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much and welcome back. And we ended up with, I was trying to look, I think we ended up with 4 rooms, 5 rooms. Christina?
I honestly don't remember
Okay.
at this point.
Do this. Oh, look, I have a picture. Sorry. So we ended up with several rooms, and we would love for you to share some of your thoughts from your room. So let's start with breakout room 4. Who was your spokesroom? person?
Susan, I don't know. Can I go first? I don't know what room I was in. But in our room, oh, is that okay if I go first?
Absolutely. Thank you for
Okay.
offering and
Okay, no
volunteering.
problem. So there were some discussion about using concept mapping with, you know, with other subject areas that we have, not just only reading, but using it in science, use it in social studies, and it's something that they can take and hang up in their room. We also talked about using essential questions to kind of gauge where our students are. I believe that also questioning and time, gauging where and how to tie vocabulary, different layers of vocabulary within each other, within the student's knowledge. So if we go from, something simple to a little more complex, layering in that vocabulary within the instruction. And if I am missing anything, please let me know.
That was great. Thank you so much, Patty, for getting us started. I'm also noticing, for time's sake, I'm just going to shout out some of the additional things that you wonderful teachers and educators put into the chat. So, bringing in GLAD strategies and YouTube videos, guest speakers, that was always one of my students' favorite things. Real artifacts, and of course, providing opportunities to real life experiences, right? So those are all wonderful and much appreciated. Thank you so much for starting us off with the sharing, Patty, and for your thoughts in the chats, or in the chat, those of you that popped those in there. My screen is being crazy. All right. Now we're going to continue with that interleaving of background knowledge and vocabulary. And we're going to look at the hierarchy of reading and the lectura hierarchy. You'll notice that both hierarchies begin with that comprehension of language, or that oral language piece, to move into that fluent reading piece. And so we know that vocabulary is highly connected to background knowledge and experience, and is a predictive of reading comprehension. That quote actually comes from Senecal, Ellett, and Rodney in 2006. When we're looking at our instruction, vocabulary is embedded throughout, or at least should be. Our tier 1 vocabulary is our everyday vocabulary. Tier 2 vocabulary are those high utility words that are frequently used, but they do need that explicit instruction and multiple opportunities. And then our tier 3 are those content specific words that require context to comprehend. And of course, multiple exposures at all phases develops those strong, expressive vocabulary usage possibilities, and not just that receptive vocabulary. Right. If we're gonna now combine the two frameworks, our MLSS framework with our structured literacy framework, we know that our layer 1 should permeate through all MLS layers and rings of support. So think about how and when does our structured literacy become embedded into our MLSS layers as you work through and within your teaching and learning communities. And so as we think about the rings of both of these, so the MLSS framework and the structured literacy framework, you think about those waves of MLSS they're meant to be fluid, just like waves. They're constantly moving. We don't put a student in a layer and leave them there. We make sure that we are addressing needs and moving them in and out as necessary. So what happens at each layer within the components of our literacy instruction? We know that many of our skills are learned in preschool and they become a foundation for later development. Excuse me. And our early childhood educators use their understanding of typical behaviors and beyond, not just our early childhood, to measure that skill development and monitor that learning progress. And can use things like the early childhood key indicators into our New Mexico instructional scope standards. We need to also remember that our skills need to be embedded and taught intentionally throughout MLSS layer 1 and into layers 2 and 3. I love this quote also from letters for early childhood educators. The quality of children's early experiences influence their language and literacy learning, and therefore their lifelong outcomes. So I want you to reflect upon what you already know and what you've heard thus far. And you're going to do a personal reflection on this. Language and literacy domain skills predict future academic performance. So take about a minute and just jot down your thoughts on this and the process. And Christina is going to lead us into some tracking.
Okay. Here we have from this Google image search some track, yeah, where we can see patterns of various shapes and sizes, directionality. When we track, not watch, and there's more information from Doug Lamov about that in Teach Like a Champion, we have the opportunity to respond to our students in the moment, respond to their needs. And we have various measures of predictability supporting our lesson planning and reflection processes from that tracking, not watching. That starts on the very first day of school as teachers are establishing routines with their students, as they're observing students on the playground. Here's a link to various templates that can support tracking, not watching. If you want to click on that and take a peek, go ahead. We're going to continue on though, because we have a bit of mini art project for you in this COB. In a moment, we're going to invite you to construct your own inner workings of the MLSS framework with the structured literacy framework. And I will show you, I'll model for you what I mean by that. Remember when we asked you to please get a standard, to choose a standard for today? This is the time we'd like you to have that at hand. And here's the standard that I was going to use. So again, if you want to use this one, you can. It's a first grade standard, reading literature 1.1, ask and answer questions about key details in a text. And we have this really fantastic graphic from NMPED about MLSS. And we have this graphic supporting our understanding of structured literacy in the science of reading. But what does it all mean when we're trying to merge it together and actually put it into play to support our students? Here is one way that we could have it make meaning for us. So when I think of those MLSS, the framework, I do think of waves. I am a Jersey girl, raised in New Hampshire. So the ocean is still really important to me. So this resonates for me. That's why I'm choosing to model it this way. And I'm thinking about that first grade standard where I need to be supporting my students in asking, creating questions, answering questions, asking questions about text, right? About key details in a text. And so I'm starting to think about their background knowledge. What is it that students are coming to me with already knowing about questions? With that, I'm thinking about what students are needing very specific language proficiency support. I'm thinking about students who my use of WIDA could really elevate the acquisition of their language skills, and what strengths are they bringing with their first language. So we're going to give you a minute or two, not to rush you, but being cognizant of our time, to sketch out for yourself where you are right now in thinking about how you make sense of these MLSS layers and their structures. We have some prompts we'll drop into the chat. And we do have a link to a Google Doc that will force a copy of the rings that you see on the screen here. So if you want to work digitally, absolutely you can, or you can sketch for yourself. And I'm just dropping that Google Doc link into the chat right now. We'll invite you to augment this build out that you're starting to create throughout the rest of the presentation in connection with that standard that you chose. So if you're not quite finished, that's fine. Again, we'll be continuing to go back to your construction of the MLSS layers within structured literacy. throughout the rest of the COP. Okay. Thank you, Kendra. Let's see. I'm going to go back and drop that link into the chat one more time. Thank you, Susan, for bearing with me.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to drop that link one more time for the forced document, or that forced copy of the document. And then Susan, go ahead, you can take it away.
And as we continue to think about and reflect on that, I would like to share this graphic, which comes from actually Santa Fe Public Schools. And we're looking at that circular where there is no beginning, there is no end, and we are expanding it out into those 4 quadrants of thinking that we associate with tracking and not watching. So we're going to have students come into us already proficient with certain skills, maybe not every skill, definitely not every skill. And we need to know or be thinking about how we are going to make sure that their learning continues. So in that top left-hand side, that quadrant, we're looking at what our standards are and where our students come to us at that moment in time. And then we move to that upper right-hand quadrant, and what do we want students to know and to be able to do as evidence that they can meet those standards, or that they have the learning necessary to proficiently meet those standards. In our process, we're unpacking those standards. We're determining what students need to do, kind of that show me what you know piece. And then we're going to continue moving around to how will we know that they have learned it? And are they going to create something? Is it going to be a formative or a summative assessment? How are we going to actually be able to justify that they have learned the content? We move into that lower left-hand quadrant. I cannot say that word today. So sorry, guys. That lower left-hand quadrant. And how are we going to respond if they did not learn it? I was definitely one of those teachers that was guilty of, well, I taught it. Oh boy, those days. It's still my job to make sure that they learn. So what am I going to do to go back and continue to track them and monitor them and make sure that they're learning? And what are my next steps going to be? And then we go back to that top left-hand quadrant where we're extending learning for all of those who are proficient, have learned it, and are ready to move on, while we're still addressing the needs of all of the other quadrants and the needs of all of our students in whatever capacity that may be, because their learning needs to continue. It doesn't stop. As with that cyclical or circular process. And Christina is going to talk to us about some of the ways that we can leverage that.
Thank you, Susan. So part of interleaving the MLSS and science of reading means that we are accessing students' background knowledge and their experiences so that we can give them that access to the standards and the content, make it relevant for them. We could do that by integrating WIDA. And this is, if you follow this link and go to pages 16 and 20, there's an excellent template that can get you started in really supporting, honing in on specific students who have English language proficiency needs, in addition to what the standards are requiring us to teach them. Differentiating, scaffolding, using intentional designs and action steps to provide those supports to our students also means that in addition to the high quality instructional material, educators are receiving those high quality professional development and learning opportunities. They are research and evidence based, and they further develop professional capacity to meet our students' needs. I think about Scarborough's rope when I think about MLSS often, because in some ways we need to start getting comfortable not being comfortable at first. That is loosely quoted from Margaret Wheatley. But it takes multiple pieces of information to discern what our students need. And just like Scarborough's rope, we do have the opportunity to follow through and discern individual strands to follow our students' learning needs, especially when we collaborate with colleagues. So the layers and their intersections and the rings, they provide opportunities for data collection within the structured literacy framework. That data collection can be actually tangibly mapped out. It can be triangulated, draw that triangle, make each point a specific data point, use the Excel sheets, cover surfaces with sticky notes, have those conversations with colleagues. This quote here by Paul Bambrick Santoyo is absolutely a reminder that it isn't just about the learning that happens, it's the reteaching that we most likely are going to need to do and that we are responsible for doing. If you would return to your MLSS circles or rings that you're building, however you are crafting that to make sense to you, think about this in relationship to that. Where might you and or your students need more support in layer 1 with that specific standard that you chose? Is it in co-planning? Is there a possibility that the standard isn't really understood very well? Could modeling from a colleague support that unpacking of that standard?
As we are reflecting on that and continue to build, I love this quote from Lady Bird Johnson. She is the wife of former President Lyndon B. Johnson. And she was quoted as saying, "Children are apt to live up to what you believe of them." And so that, to me, is the epitome of that layer 1 instruction. All students, all receiving access to instruction. It is our responsibility as educators to provide our students with the tools that they need for learning. And as we provide access to all students, one of the things that resonated with me in a conversation with another colleague was that doesn't automatically mean that all students are going to be proficient in layer 1. We are providing them access to the learning. Therefore, we may need those layers 2 and 3 for additional support, resources, practice, time, and all of the building and continued learning. all three layers, layer 1, 2, and 3, need to be taught explicitly. And it is our opportunity and responsibility to close those gaps and move toward grade level, age level proficiency. And Christine is going to share some alignment opportunities with us.
Here in the chat, I'm dropping that link to some of those templates of the Track Not Watch. And they are from the Priority Bureau of Schools that is partnering with New Mexico. Tracking Not Watching allows teachers to respond along a range of immediacy. So we know we can, right then and there, we can make some clarifications that our students are showing us they need. We could make sure those students are in that next small group, or we can do that whole group reteach if necessary. So when we're tracking and not watching, interleaved with the MLSS layers and our structured literacy, we can see more directly that alignment opportunities within the components of structured literacy do exist. For example, if we have this letter spelling inventory, or even a spelling test, or students writing sample, like here, it says off limits, though it's not spelled that way. We can code the type of error and make a response based on what the students are showing us is in or not in their writing. So if I'm using dictation, or when I use dictation, I can have that be a demonstration of my students' understanding of writing in their syntax, in their discourse. But I have work to do before that, right? I have to ask myself, what have I explicitly taught my students, though? What do I want that dictation data to actually show? And then we're leveraging the different types of data collection tools that we're using to better align those structured literacy components. Planning ahead, mapping out that entire scope and sequence of the lesson plan, of the assessment, understanding that primary focus first. What will students need to know? And what will they need to know how to do to meet the proficiency needs that that lesson is asking them, or the assessment is going to measure? Is the assessment really measuring what it was intended to? Can the student made work or the assessment, can you take that yourself? Can you create what you're asking students to create as that modeled example, as that exemplar? And what do students really need to do to meet those requirements for that highest level of proficiency? Not that I have this data and now I just move on. When is that protected time that the data analysis and those data-driven conversations are occurring? Through PLCs, through team meetings, is it a purposeful, consistent, protected time? Go back to your MLSS build, or that sketch that you've started, and connect with that Track Not Watch. How do you connect the Track Not Watch, or TNW, the data analysis and the data-driven conversations, to MLSS? Think about what your sites are already doing. What are the site-specific protocols that are already in place, or what needs to be there and it's not there yet? We continue to track, not watch students' progressions with their learning objectives and the curriculum overall, the standards, when we create intentional, independent learning opportunities. So absolutely, we have the structured literacy framework supporting the science of reading. We have our curriculum, the standards, We have data and collaborative data conversations. And we have the explicit instruction with all three components of gradual release, not shortchanging the you do portion at all. We need to provide students with access to communication and language-rich, independent and interdependent opportunities with peers. So this learning pyramid here was originated in the 1960s by Edgar Dale. And it's a descriptive model showing the progressions of learning experiences from the more concrete to the abstract. It's actually not meant as a hierarchy, but it's meant to be a reminder of the rich experiences we're responsible for providing our students. And some of those cooperative learning opportunities come from the Kagan strategies. We've used a couple in this COP. We've all, as adult learners, had the opportunities to engage in them. There's the jigsaw strategy where students start in a small group and then they get reassigned to different groups, taking that knowledge base from their original group to the new group and sharing that content out to their peers. The card fan, where each card number or symbol has a designated job, or the teacher says we're going to hear from this number. Everyone in the group, make sure that number is ready to share out. How, well, return back to those, that MLSS sketch that you're building again. Think about that standard that you chose at the start of the COP. How and when can you connect intentional you do opportunities to the Common Core state standard and students' learning goals within MLSS? And where would they fall in Dale's learning pyramid? I'm going to drop that prompt into the chat as well. And please, by all means, if I say I'm going to drop something into the chat and you're not seeing it, let me know. I just caught that myself. Okay. Interleaving MLSS with the science of reading, it does include the practice of students moving from one layer to another within MLSS. It's essential. Layer 3 does not mean that students have an IEP necessarily, right? And layer 3 students who are receiving supports in layer 3 does not mean that they are not also active participants within layer 1. So we have to ensure that students aren't stagnating within either layer, because that's not what the layers represent. They don't represent fixed or finite opportunities of learning and understanding for our students. And we might think that what happens in layers 2 and 3 stays in layers 2 and 3. Instead, though, we're going to use those resources that students are having very specific direct instruction on in layers 2 and 3. We're going to bring those back into layer 1. Be they personal sound walls or specific graphic organizers, specific intentional goals that have been set with the interventionist or IEP goals. And we're going to utilize that protected PLC time or team meetings to also track, not watch, and analyze how students are doing with their resources. That can be its own separate data set. This is another track, not watch. This is a teacher-made example of a track, not watch template. The idea of any template we share is that it's a place to start, right? It's not, this is what you have to use, but it's a way to get us started, to find what works for us.
And I just dropped in the chat a link to the WIDA standards framework, which was that left-hand graphic on Christina's last slide. And so as we continue to move on and track, not watch our students and their learning process and progression towards proficiency, we have to remember that within the assessment process, it's important to have a means of identifying the level of development for predictive indicators and the standard outcome expectations. In doing that, it is vital to getting these layers to continue to work together, to continue to be fluid. And one of the ways that we can do that is, yep, you guessed it, data. Data coupled with explicit instruction, and all three components of gradual release can help us with that. I was alluding to this quote a little bit earlier from John Wooden that I love so much. It's quoted in Teach Like a Champion 3.0. The quote is, teaching is defined as knowing the difference between I taught it and they learned it. Of course, John Wooden was a former English teacher before he won 10 NCAA championships in 12 years at UCLA. No team or athlete of any kind goes from, oh, I was shown once to I'm a world-class champion. It requires practice, it requires explicit instruction, and it requires continual learning. John Wooden goes on to say that no matter how well you explain or demonstrate the material, gaps in understanding will emerge. It's what you do next, how you respond to the errors that mattered most. Will you see misunderstandings? Will you ignore them? Will you blame students and express your frustration? There will be a gap between what you taught and what they understood. Regardless of why, it will be your job to fix it, end quote. And I love that because I had a principal that forced me out of my comfort zone and forced me to now have that understanding of there is definitely a difference between I taught it and they learned it. Assessment in all forms should be utilized to improve our instruction. It's not the end goal. Data from assessments can help us meet students where they are by providing research-based, high-quality instruction and making sure that the assessments given to students are purposeful and intentional. You'll notice here on the left-hand side of your screen, those two graphics, those come directly from the MLSS implementation guide, and they give us some food for thought and some types of data and how to use it. And of course, we all recognize the iStations data on the right. Analysis of our assessment data should give us information on each student's learning processes, growth, and even provide opportunities to increase our teaching and student learning outcomes. We avoid testing too much by making sure that there's a purpose to our testing and ensuring that there is time for instruction that is scaffolded and differentiated. We are creating those bridges for students. We know that in order to collect the right type and amount of data, An effective assessment process includes a continuum of procedures and uses assessments for the purpose for which they are designed or were designed. There are several types of assessment. We have standardized and non-standardized. We have formative and summative. And some of those include like screenings. Everybody in the state of New Mexico administers a dyslexia screening in first grade. We have progress monitoring. One of the ways that I progress monitored when I was in the classroom is I had a clipboard with a roster of all of my students' names on it. And at the top was whatever skill I was monitoring at the time. And I had a key for how I was recording their progress, if they got it, if they need support, if I needed to get additional information, or maybe I needed additional support because something I was doing wasn't reaching my students. And so I could look for that extra support or those outside resources myself. Diagnostic type assessments. Most of the time, that is someone that is licensed specifically to measure those strengths and needs. Outcome documents might be as simple as an exit ticket. I, for one, like to have all of my data in one place. It just makes it easier for me to read and understand. And so I would encourage you to develop a place, a process, and maybe even a storage system that works for you that utilizes research-based resources. Remember from earlier, reteaching is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And we want to make sure that we remember and recognize that learning happens over time. We are actively monitoring our students as they are learning in the classroom. And as it is necessary and important, we are reteaching. All right, we're going to do another reflection as we think about this.
Susan, in
I
the
want you to
interest of time, we only have 8 minutes left, everyone. I'm so sorry. So it may seem like we're speeding you through this last reflection, and that is absolutely not our intention, but we do want to respect your time. Now it's 7 minutes because I took those 20 seconds.
Absolutely. So as we're wrapping up, we want you to think about, where are you? Where are your students? And what specific needs do you still have? How has your thinking changed after today? What change or changes will you make in your professional practice? And I would like you to pull out your rings one last time as we augment that component.
And I'm going to do a real quick, very quick share out of my finished product. It's messy. Yes, it is for you. And it's how my mind is working with that first grade standard. And where I arrived was, gosh, if I'm a sixth grade teacher, or I've been specifically focusing more with older grades or older standards, and now I'm supporting a first grade standard, and I'm wondering, what do we mean by key details in first grade? How do I help students determine what a first grade key detail might be? I'm also thinking about the kinds of questions that my students have been asking and answering are not the kind that I think could leverage easy access, or the kind of access that I would want to measure as proficient. and I know that's my responsibility as it's the first grade standard, for a key detail in a text. I'm thinking about students who could benefit from sentence starters, sentence frames, and I may have that data from students where, boy, those sentence starters and sentence frames, they haven't been enough. I can't get my students to use complete sentences. And I'm really focusing now on the spoken language. Yes, the written language, that's important, but I want to be able to hear my students use this language with their peers when we're talking about the text. So this is my example of building out how the MLSS layers would work with that specific standard as I'm thinking about the semantics and the syntax that I need to support my students in asking and answering questions to really hit those key details in a text.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christina. Let's, in closing, we're going to show you kind of a graphic that we put together that we feel represents all of the pieces, or at least the majority of the pieces that we need to have in place. And if even one piece is not there, what does that do to change the overall layer one instruction and the impact and interworkings of that? And to finish up, we would like to make sure that we addressed our objective and did what we said that we wanted to do today.
So we intended to, and we hope that you feel we provided you with opportunities to leverage and enhance your current understandings of MLSS and guide your instructional planning and delivery to meet the needs of all the students that you support, that you work with through the science of reading, or the New Mexico instructional scope and the MLSS framework itself. And we do have on one of our final slides a feedback. If you could scan that QR code. I think we can drop the link into the chat too.
I'm doing that now.
Thank you, Susan. So we'll drop the link to the specific Google form that code is linked to. If you could take some time before you end your day today and share back 3 pieces of new information that you learned today, something that squared or resonated with you, with your thinking or your current practice, and something that's circling in your head, as well as next steps you would take. And then moving us right along, because we do have 2 minutes officially, but we can stay on. Here we will drop the resources link into the chat of different resources and references that we used.
There we go.
Oh, thank you, Susan. You're faster. Thank you so much.
I'm
Awesome. And then lastly, here is our contact information for Susan and myself. And we will see many of you again for our coaching PLC this afternoon. Thank you
again,
so
we
much.
want to thank you all for being here and would love to hear any feedback that you may have.